Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Really excited to discuss this topic. The top 5 things you need to know about for remote hiring. Especially over the last 18 months, we've seen a huge impact in, working from home and how to navigate that. And I think it's a very relevant conversation with a lot of hybrid models and current work from home or remote situations. So we're really honored to have our guest, Ed Zukowski, with us. And just a little bit about me, real quick. My name's Eldon Crosswhite, and I'm the Director of Sales here at ISB Global. We are an employment screening service and corporate risk management. So basically anything for your pre-employment and post-employment background screening services, we help navigate those solutions and provide services for that. Want to go ahead and give Ed, thank you for joining us today.
Sure thing, Eldon.
So Ed, could you give us a quick, a little bit about what you do and the company that you're with?
Sure, not a problem. So my title is I'm VP of Global HR with AFIMAC Corporation, and we are label ourselves as a crisis management company assisting Fortune 500 companies, government entities in dealing with crisis events. And what do I mean by crisis events? It could be natural disasters such as hurricanes, floods. It could be what we call man-made disasters, labor dispute issues around the country, executive protection needs, plant relocations. We have service lines of skilled labor, tactical security officers, and food service and logistics. So basically, we can go in and help companies with events they typically do not want to deal with, and it's outside their business. So we're there to support companies.
Fantastic. Definitely a wide array of solutions within that. We're really excited to be, partnered with you and your organization, and really enjoy the partnership. So thank you again for joining us today. So Ed, let's go ahead and just jump right in. I know we're here to discuss, remote hiring and the top 5 things to look for, but I think a great starting point for that would be pre-screening. Your pre-qual before you even really get to the interview process. With that, even pre-pandemic, we all understand how important having a good pre-screening program is in place. How is it different within the remote aspect now?
Well, in the good old days, you wanted to be face to face with somebody. You wanted to interact, you wanted to read body language, get all those verbal cues. So remote interviewing is a little different. Obviously, as many of you may do, we try to do it over video, more so than just a phone call. So again, you can have that interaction. You can look at that body language. You can see when you ask a question how they respond. Some of the other things continuing to do, right, is pre-screening is we do assessment testing. We find it beneficial to look at hard skills and soft skills. Obviously, background screening comes into play. Even these days, social media, right? There's companies out there that will do social media investigations. Or, if you're in HR or in a management position, you can just go out there and just plug in somebody's name and see what comes up. And, you may think it's not important, but you want to make sure you catch this before one of your employees does, because they see a new person walk into your building and they Google that person's name. And if they find something out you didn't discover, you can imagine the ruckus that goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of comes down to brand management at that point. When you don't have a real good sense and feel for the individual, like you said, social media has become a big pivotal point, especially in the remote world. Something that we offer at ISB is 100% FCRA compliant social media screening. So really what it identifies is, any acts of violence, threats, illicit drugs, things of that nature. So it's definitely a great gauging tool on the character of the individual that you're bringing in. It's fantastic. Ed, it's kind of getting some traction, especially over the last 2 years, with positions that are, typically screened on a regular basis, annual screens, monitoring, arrest monitoring or criminal alert monitoring has been a topic in the industry for a while. What are your thoughts on remote employees and being able to, have an arrest alert to notify you if, hey, your remote employee is not necessarily doing what they're supposed to be doing on a regular basis?
Oh, it's absolutely important. You have to protect your company, and knowing when things happen, even in real time, getting alerts is very important. We can do a screen of somebody upon hire, but if something comes up a year or two down the road, do you ever go back and double check things after that initial screen?
Right, absolutely. Good stuff. Okay, well, let's go ahead and jump into our first bullet point here and discuss culture a little bit. Culture is extremely important pre-pandemic, even, and, really finding the people to come into the organization can be a struggle sometimes that fit with your culture. How do you navigate that through remote hiring and identify a good culture fit?
Yeah, that's a great question because the old saying is employees don't leave companies a lot of times. They leave managers, and they leave the culture around those managers. So a lot of times we spend much time analyzing a person, their education, their background, their work history, what kind of technical skills they bring in their position, and we don't tend to spend a lot of time on their culture fit, or again, those soft skills. Mm-hmm. And it's just as important because, I can have an employee that can do their job blindfolded, but if they cannot get along with the people they work with, they can't engage with their employees, they can't communicate or interact, it does me no good. So culture is important. Again, going back to looking at soft skill assessments. So instead of just measuring technical skills, trying to get a read on their adaptability, flexibility, communication skills. That's just as important to me as if 1 and 1 equals 2 when they add those up.
Right. Absolutely. And how important would you say, that individual's values and core beliefs align with organizational core values and beliefs to be good at their job and to be a good culture fit? Because it's kind of, one side of the coin to the other, right? I mean, because you can be fantastic at your job and have different values. Do you find that a difficult situation if they don't align?
Oh, definitely. It's sometimes those small problems that burst into macro problems. Aligning culture is important, and spending the time in the interview process to explain the company's core values, the mission, how you work as a group and teams within a company is very important. And then even asking the candidates those situational questions to see how they respond. If they were put in this situation, how do they work their way out of it?
Fantastic. And I'm sure, continuing culture through a remote world is difficult enough as it is. So making sure that you have those people that can, individually impact that is important as well, right? Bring something to the culture.
Exactly. Well, culture is a two-way street. It has to be interactive. And culture is something that's always evolving and developing as a company grows, and you may bring new people into the workforce, right? I always say we take best practices. Just because we've been doing something the same way for 30 years doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way for the way to continue. But even with our own group of employees, we've been told sometimes employees have a hard time adapting to change. So you have to have a culture where things are, I guess, are communicated properly and explained properly, and especially when it comes to change. If you're in a company that has mergers and acquisitions and you're bringing in new bodies and new ideas, you have to prepare employees for that.
That's great. So teamwork, extremely important, but not necessarily easy to do from a remote circumstance, right? So can you give us a couple examples of how you promote teamwork within the organization to kind of fit the culture and the company needs?
Sure, we do some business things and we do some fun things. So we struggled with this at first as our group of employees went remote. We utilized Microsoft Teams to assign project teams, tasks. So we keep track of everything in Microsoft Teams. All our video conferencing is done through Teams. We use a product called Yammer. There's many products out there like it, but we use it as kind of an internal intranet where we make sure recognitions are going out there, any important company information. Because we do have scattered employees in offices in different countries, we want to unite those employees even though they're remote. So it could be something as small as, hey, this employee just had a new child and we're announcing it to our global group to try to bring everybody together. Or this employee is being recognized. Our client raised their hand and said this employee went above and beyond in servicing them. So we do that. Fun stuff, right? We used to have a lot of in-person get-togethers, be it a potluck lunch or a holiday party. We've utilized Teams to try to have social events globally, remote social events. There's companies out there, and I'm not endorsing any company, but we've used Airbnb to have online virtual events. It could be scavenger hunts or other things, but it's still building that culture and bringing employees together, even though they're remote at this time.
That's great. Some very valuable tools with that. It's important to be able to collaborate with your team, even when you're just, in an office all by yourself for 8 hours a day. You got to have that interaction. It's extremely important. So with that, it's really important to be able to bring on employees that are independent, especially from a remote aspect, and that they can be a self-starter and self-motivating. But how do you identify through remote hiring the difference between somebody who's independent or maybe just a lone wolf?
Yeah, great question, and that can also be difficult at times. I go back to asking those situational questions geared towards, teamwork and being independent. Now, in our company, there's time for both of those situations. We don't micromanage. We like to set a project, give an end date, give a goal, provide feedback and guidance along the way. But a lot of times, we want the employees to work their way through to that goal. So sometimes when I'm looking at people, even during an interview process, I look to see how much they engage in communication with me instead of me reaching out to them. It could be during an interview. I interview them, and then obviously they reach back. They want more feedback. They have more questions. They reach out to me. And an employee who's working remote. Do I have an employee that only responds when I communicate with them? I send them an email, I get a response. I call them, I get a response. Or does this employee reach out to me? They initiate the conversation. So I can tell that way, usually during the interview process, how the communication is going to flow down the road.
Very, very valuable. So willingness to learn. Not only must it be difficult to, have ongoing training and things of that nature in a remote world, but can you tell me a little bit about, identifying coachability, through a remote hire?
So we look at a lot of things. Again, we do assessments, and the assessments are not to grade somebody or to make the full hiring decision. It's to find strengths and weaknesses, right? So if I need somebody to know Excel and I give them an Excel assessment and they come back with, okay, they know Excel 70%, I know I need a level of 90% for what they're going to do. So it gives me an opportunity to gear some training programs towards that and to coach them towards that, or even assign them a mentor to do that. Again, if I have somebody that I know is going to fit into our culture, can be communicative and engaged with everybody else, I always say I'll take somebody with the 70% Excel skills and teach them the other 30%.
Right? That's great. And what would you say a key identifier would be to, gauge somebody's adaptability through your hiring process?
Another good question. Put me on the spot with that one.
How adaptable are you?
And it's funny because, I can sit here and probably all of us, those that are joining the conversation, when we interview people, there's times you get BS and you got to sort your way through things. And I always say sometimes you never know the true person until they're sitting in the seat and doing the job. You have to look at your current group of employees, and they kind of set the standard on adaptability, how much they can do, and then you try to measure the candidates against your current workforce. Obviously, when we went to, we were almost 100% office-based, and when we went to a remote workforce, there was a lot of adaptability that took place, and some of it took over time to happen. So you look at what happened with your current employees, and when you're interviewing somebody, you kind of put those situations out there and see how they would react to those.
I think that's a perfect baseline, right? Because we all had to go through that. We all had to do the shift into a remote setting from in office. So I think that's a fantastic baseline to be able to gauge. That's great. Communication. Now, you've touched on this a couple times, and it seems like it'd be really easy to identify through, any hiring process. But, necessarily, I think, we're all really good at transmitting our thoughts, right? But receiving them is kind of where the breakdown comes, at least for me in a lot of ways. Maybe it's because I'm in sales, but receiving other people's thoughts and ideas might be a little bit difficult in some situations. And mostly that's because I just need to hush my mouth. But what are some of the, key things that you look for in an interview process that, you can tell that, hey, communication is going to be really good with this individual?
Yeah, well, number one, and a lot of us tend to have the habit of liking to talk, especially if you're in HR, because you're a people person.
Right.
You have to learn to let the other person speak and put on your listening ears, because you will learn so much by just listening to a candidate and what they're speaking. And sometimes I say, we have some people in our organization, we say they have the long pause where they don't answer right away, and then that gives the other person a chance to add some more thought process into it. So letting the candidate speak is very important. And then, once you get them on board, do things. You're always looking at communication. Listen, within our own group here, so we do employee engagement surveys, we do core values surveys throughout the year. And one of the things that always comes back is we can be better communicators as a management team and as a company to our employees. And I think a lot of organizations hear that from their employees. Yeah. And we got to drill it down, because what does that mean, right? If they want more communication, exactly what kind of communication do they want? And, we'll take it down. We'll have town hall meetings. We'll have focus groups to break down that communication. They want to hear more about our business plan. They want to hear if we're hitting our goals and targets as a business. So taking that and sharing that with candidates, right? That we as a company, um, when we communicate with our employees, these are the things we do. We do
Mhm.
have surveys, we do have town hall meetings, we do have focus groups, we do provide feedback. We want it to be interactive. So again, if you lay that all out during the interview process, the candidate kind of knows the expectations, and you can sell yourself as a company too because you're showing that you're communicating with those people.
Excellent. Yeah. And you hit it right on the head, right? Communication is such an important piece of business. And I have to say, every company that I've ever been at, it's the one thing that is constantly being improved and looked at because it's so important. And that's even, working in office where you can step into somebody's office and have a full on conversation with them. So, I find, and maybe it's just me, but I find communication to be, even more important today, especially working from a remote aspect. I've worked remote for many years and, just sitting in my office, I need communication from the organization and the individuals and the peers that I work with on a regular basis, right?
Exactly, and Alvin, it's more than just emails because email is one way communication. A lot of times things get misinterpreted. Sometimes people take the messaging wrong and get offended when there's no intent.
Mm,
So I always tell employees, listen, pick up the phone or video call somebody,
yeah.
just to have that communication.
That's great. Great advice. All right. So, number 5, this is, our last point of the day. So self-motivation, people are working remote, we're hiring remote. What is it that stands out from a candidate that that they're a good fit and know that they're going to be a self-motivated individual within the organization?
It can be very small stuff on the front end, right? Like I said earlier, you interview somebody and they provide feedback. They shoot you a message right away. They ask more questions.
Hmm.
Um, if you're sending them information to complete, they're very responsive to it. If you're sending assessments or you want them to complete a background screen, that they're doing it in a timely manner. That they're shows they're interested in the position first of all,
Right.
and it just goes from there. It's those tiny steps on the front end
Mhm.
that are indicators.
And, kind of a trick question there. Can you be self motivated without passion, or is passion what drives self motivation?
Good trick question. Well, sometimes people are self-motivated for themselves and for their own goals, and not necessarily maybe for the organization as a whole. So sometimes you got to filter out what may be true and not true as far as self-motivation.
Hmm.
Um, when people have a passion, um, and a lot of times it's those new employees that come on. They're coming in, they're fresh, they're excited, and what happens from that initial onboarding meeting to 1, 2, 3 months down the road to a year. Sometimes that self motivation, that passion, kind of disappears,
Mm.
and you got to look at it. Is it something the company did to decrease that passion? Is it something a supervisor or a manager did, or is the employee just not happy in the situation they're in?
Yeah, or was it a false flag to begin with, right? So
Yeah.
that's great insight. Well, Ed, I really thank you so much for all of your time today, and we're getting right at the end there. So, greatly appreciate your insight and expertise into remote hiring and what to look for and how to navigate that. So, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you everyone for joining us.